Thanks for coming back. One of my favorite things since I'm a coach and I meet other coaches, a lot of time when I ask these coaches, do you have a coach? They actually don't have a coach. And I find that a bit weird because it's like, don't you believe in the idea? So I try to find coaches in the world that charge at least double what I do, so that it makes an easy sell for me to sell what I have. Right? And one of those coaches that I had gave me a good insight because I flew over to London to see him and I sat down. And remember, the best thing about a coach is not that they're brilliant, it's that they're not you. So they can show you things that is blind to you, but blindingly obvious to somebody who's not you. So we're sitting there and I'm making insights. I'm like, wow, this is so good. This is so good. I gotta have more. I gotta have more. Anybody have that feeling when you just go like, this is good. I want more. I want more. Right? So I start asking him like, once we're done with this, do you have like, because I was still a little bit in the old idea of coaching. So I was like, do you have like an advanced program we can do now? Do you have the ultra? And he looks at me and says, sure. So I said, what about it? Is it more expensive? How does it work? No, it's the same price. I said, okay, so still a bit of money. So could you give me a little bit about what it is? And he looks at me and coolly as ever just says, it's going to be more of the same, but with better listening from you. Right? And that just strikes me as very insightful. Because I reread books. I've read a lot of books, but my favorites I come back to. And usually I have a highlighter. So the first time I read it, I have like a yellow highlighter, and I do a yellow line at the front of the book, and I, for example, says 1999. So the next time I read it, I check, and I see it's a yellow highlighter, so I'll take a pink highlighter, and I go 2005. And the weird thing is, when I reread it, I never understand why I highlighted the yellow stuff. It's like, why did I do that? That's not important. This is important. And it goes to show us something very important about us, that information can only go in when it's relevant for where we are now. Right? So the good teachers were good at showing us that it was relevant for where I am right now. And then you're interested. Wild horses can't drag your concentration away when you're genuinely fascinated, interested, and curious. But if you don't have that, wild horses cannot keep your focus. And still people talk about you should focus. No, you have to make it interesting for you. If it's not interesting for you, you can't focus. Focus is a byproduct. It's not something you do. It's what you naturally do. Anybody here ever played a good video game? Did you have to work on focusing on it? Or were you just naturally there? Anybody here had a really good teacher? Did you have to sit and focus in class, or was the concentration just there? Anybody had one of those teachers that is about as much fun to watch as watching paint dry? Did you have to work on your concentration and focus? And did the teacher blame you for not being focused? Yeah, it's not about that. So I want you to realize that, because I want to let you off the hook. I want to let you off the hook about what it's all about. So I want to start this time with a little bit of a business story. And the reason I want to start with the business story is that if you're coaches, if you're leaders, if you're doing anything, one of the ways that you make things relevant is you have to connect what you're doing to the bottom line. Do you understand that? It has to be connected to the bottom line. And that is connected to what Eric is saying, it's connected to what Janet is saying, because you have to connect it in a way where they go, I see what I'm paying for, and I see that I get value back. So you can't be there going like, oh, I help people have better lives. If you go into a business, you have to somehow show that what you're going to give them. And it doesn't matter if you own the business or if you're a manager in the business or if you're running the local football team, it's still the same thing. You have to show that here's how it connects to bottom line. So for example, I had a big company and I came in there and they were all very stressed. They were all very stressed. Have you ever seen when people are stressed, it's like the light is on, but nobody's home. You look at them and you say things, and it's like it just bounces off them because they're thinking about other stuff. So I said, why are you guys so stressed? And they said, we just went through the budget work. And I said, so? Well, we just had the best year ever last year. So we were projecting to do even better this year. And now we've been through the budget, and we're not doing as good as we were last year. And now we're stressed. So I said, why are you stressed about that? Are you going out of business? No. Last year we did like a 22%, and this year we're doing like 6%. So I said, so you're still making a profit? Yeah, but it's not as good as we budgeted. Now, I want to ask you something. Can anybody actually predict the future? Yes or no? No, you can't predict the future. So I looked at them and said, so you're actually stressed because you sat a year ago and hallucinated what would be a good year, and now you didn't have that year, so you decided you have to be stressed. And the CEO looks at me and says, no, Anders, that's not the way it is. This budget is based on hard data. And I said, who picked those data? And he says, well, we did. Kind of sheepishly. So he said, well, you have to make a budget, don't you? I said, you can make a budget if you want to, but I don't see it as necessary for running even a big company as yours. And they go, like, what would we do then? And I said, let's just see if I could connect what I do to the bottom line. Let's say that if I teach your people in the company to understand their own psychology and to know where their feelings are coming from in such a way that they can show up with their best self more often. And when they inevitably fall off the wagon, so to speak, and they become stressed and they are up in their head and they start doing things that they don't want to do, they understand what it is, or somebody else in the firm understand what it is and come in and kind of time out. So they come back as fast as possible from that, and then they go back to doing their best. And if everybody does that every week of this year, will the result be better, as good as you can get, no matter what you have dreamed up as a budget? And the CEO went, yeah, of course, if that was done, then you might not need a budget. So they actually took away the budget and did better than ever. It's kind of weird. I'm just trying to give you a different sense of how things work. Like one company actually called me up and said, you came highly recommended, we need you in this company. And I said, why do you need me? And he said, well, I've heard you're the guy who helps people think outside of the box. And I said, you called the wrong person. And he says, what? No, that's not what I do, but I heard you're really good at helping people with thinking outside the box. Now what I do is I tell them there is no box. And he goes, yeah, you're the guy. Right? But you have to connect it somehow. What does that do? How is it that it's going to make something of it? So I was in a group where we were for Gothenburg, which is close to my hometown. This is quite a few years ago. For the first time ever, Bruce Springsteen was going to come to Gothenburg. Anybody know the boss? Right? So he's coming to Gothenburg and he's going to do 3 concerts. But the town of Gothenburg has a big meeting about it and says, no, he can't come. And here's why the politician said he can't come. It will cost 60 million Swedish crowns just for the police around the arena for 3 days. And that will cost the town too much. Now, if you look at that, of course you're going to say no, right? So I had a little team of people, and we talked about it, and we said, well, he's going to have about 80,000 people for 3 days, which is 240,000 people. That's not normally in Gothenburg. They're going to go there. They have to live somewhere. They have to eat somewhere. They have to take a taxi, and so forth and so on. And there's a communal tax on everything that goes on in Gothenburg. So we actually just did the math and said, how much would that be? And it turned out it would be about 580 million to Gothenburg. So we said, a little bit like Phil said, I have 200 here and you can buy it for 100. So we said, you're saying no because it costs 60 million in policiary efforts, but he would actually bring 580 million. So here's the deal. You give me 60, I give you 580, and you're saying no. And the leading politician at the time, bless his heart, was really good at just shifting his opinion like most politicians. I think it's a good idea that Bruce comes here. And it turns out the town made 815 million in taxes, but said no because it cost 60. See how that, we are a bit narrow-minded when you see, we have to connect it and show, you give me 1 million, I'll give you 2 back. If you can show that, there is not a client in the world that says no. See, that's the education. It's not, I come from a big, big company and we've done this and this and this. It's how do you make it real for the customer that give me 1 million, I'll give you 2 back. And if that is real and that is the promise and you can deliver on it, nobody will say no. Right? So it's a different way of viewing it. That's what I'm trying to help you out with here. So what is it that shapes all these things? One of the things that I'm pointing to here, which I find interesting, are decisions. Have you ever thought about decisions? We were actually talking during lunch, me and a couple of the attendees here, about how me and my wife met. And then I told them how my mother and father met. And they met by my mom and a friend of hers were walking down the street in my hometown. From the other side, my dad is walking down. When he passes my mom and her friend, my mom says to her friend, "Oh my God, he's so good looking. Let's run around the block so we can meet him again." Right? Now, what would have happened if she would have said, "I don't know"? Well, me and my sister wouldn't be here. Right? So sometimes I actually told my mom, "I'm so grateful for you running around the block," because otherwise I wouldn't even be. But can you imagine that you have those places, if you look back into your history, that if you would have done that instead of that in that little instance, it would be completely different and you wouldn't be sitting here. Anybody agree? So would it be interesting to have a little bit of an hour to talk about how do you make better decisions? Where does good decisions come from? How are they made? Because there are times when you make decisions where you afterwards go like, what was I thinking? But have you also had decisions where you were thinking, that is brilliant, I don't even know how I did that, right? So would it be nice if that one happened a bit more than the other one? Just, would that be worth the admission and the time alone if we could do something on that baseline nature, right? So here's what I want to tell you a story to see, because as you remember what Eric said, stories are the way that we go into our mind to understand things. So I have this guy running an IT company back in Stockholm. He has about 3,000 employees, and they're thinking about going public because they've stayed private for a long, long time. And now he is a bit stressed. And the reason he's stressed is that there's an American venture capitalist firm who comes in and does a hostile takeover of the firm. And their idea is, we see that it's a bargain, so we'll buy it, and then put in 10 billion into it, put it out on the stock market, and they have to buy another company, consolidate those two, and the synergy effects will make it so we get our money back, bam, in a year or two. Now that's how the American psychology about it is, right? So now he comes in, and the CEO gets told from these Americans once they've taken over, we want you to stay. He's almost at the point where he wants to leave, but you have to stay. We bought it because you are here, and we have a contract that says you got to stay or you lose all the bonuses and whatever, right? So he's kind of forced into staying. And then they tell him, here are, I can't remember, it was 6 or 7 companies that we studied in around Europe, that if you buy them, we think it would be a good fit. And here's what I want you to do. Put together a task force, find out which one of those companies actually fit with your company best. And I want you to have all that done so we can buy it in 9 months. That's pretty quick. I don't know if you know business in that, that's quick. So now all of a sudden this guy is starting to stress. He can't sleep at night, he's talking to his wife, he's doing all this, but he meets a CEO that I coached. And that guy says, you don't look like you normally look. I think I know a guy that you should talk to. So he calls me up, we agree to coach, and we talk about what we talked about the first 2-3 hours together, right? We talk about how you're actually living in the experience of your thinking, but it really looks to you like you're living in the experience of your circumstance. And when you actually get convinced about that, you can't help to try to fix the circumstance, and when you do, it gets worse. So he starts understanding this. He says, I'm back to sleeping, I'm doing this. And then about 5 or 6 times we see each other. So we're not that far into coaching. He comes to me, and he's flown in from Stockholm. And I open the door, and the light is on, nobody's home. And I can tell. So I look at him and said, what's going on? And he goes, those damn Americans. And I said, what is it with the Americans? Well, you know, I taught my team a little bit about what you were talking to, and all of them got into the zone. So we are now already gone with 4 of the companies. We only have 2 left to choose from. And I thought we were going to use the last 7 months to do the perfect decision and make this work. And we have these 2. And now somebody in my group leaked to the Americans to have a favor later and said, they're much further along than you think. They can probably do it soon. So the Americans come in and they say, I want that decision 3 weeks from now. And now he's like, oh my God, I can't even. He could hardly speak, right? So I look at him and I said, you don't look very coachable. And you know what he tells me? He says, yes, I was wondering myself why the fuck I was coming down here. Now, before I learned what I'm teaching you, I would have taken that personally. Like, my time is not as important as yours. Like, you were just going to blow me off. But now I know, of course, that's what I'm going to say is off balance. Naturally, is going to say this. So I said, well, your flight is probably booked back as normal, so we have a couple of hours anyway, so why don't you come in and talk? We just don't coach. So we're sitting there, and he's explaining, like, oh, I have these 2 companies, and now we have these 2, and I thought I would have a lot of time, but now we only have 3 weeks, but these 2 are so close to each other that I just can't choose between them. Anybody had that feeling, like, they're so close, and I don't know which one? It can even be a relationship, right? So he was driving himself crazy, like, I can't choose because they're so close to each other. I don't know which one is better. If I make the wrong decision, we lose billions. If I make the right one, we make billions. I have 3,000 people that I'm responsible for, right? So I know that's what it looks like to somebody off balance. Now, I don't have to coach him. I don't have to do anything. The only thing I look for, did anybody in here, when you were small, have one of those little toys that was round in the bottom and it had lead down there, and then it was plastic on the top, so if you pushed it, it went Anybody have one of those, right? And that was frustrating because everything else until up to that point when you were little, you pushed it, it fell. So you could sit there for hours just going, no, that way, no. That's the human spirit. That's the human clarity. It self-corrects as soon as you stop pushing on it. But what we do when we get down here is we start doing this. Oh, I got to get back up. I got to get back up. I got to get back up. And once you panic and kind of hit the panic button, that's what keeps it down. But you think it's the solution, so you hit harder. And then all of a sudden you give up and it goes boom, and you can see it, right? So what I'm looking for in a client is the time when he does this. So I'm talking to him about his boy who's like 12 years old, how he's doing the football team, just having a regular human discussion. About 35 minutes into it, I can see in his eyes that for some reason he's done this. So I look at him. When I see that, I immediately call him on it. I said, you look a little bit more coachable right now. And he sits there and thinks about it and says, yeah, I feel a bit better actually. I said, so what do you want to talk about? And he says, I don't know. That's a bit weird, isn't it? So I had to say, you came in here with a pretty big problem. Maybe we should start there. And you know what he says to me? Nah, not necessary anymore. And I'm like, what? Why not? I don't know. I just realized that if we have the best team forever that's working on this, and we've been in a good state of mind. And no matter how much we look at these two companies, we can actually not separate them. It really doesn't matter which one we take, and this one feels better. So what should we talk about? Right? So it's starting to understand that when you're off balance like this, things that are close look like, I can't choose between them, and I can't sleep, and I don't know what to do. And as soon as you go, it's like, oh, there's that close, then it doesn't matter, I'll take that one. Right? And it hasn't got anything to do with this, because it could be the other way around. I had one CEO, and we were coaching, and after a while I said, what would you really like to have help with? Because he was a bit hard to come up with something. So every time he came in and said, you just talk and I'll listen. Right? I said, that's not quite coaching, but we can do it. You're paying. Right? So I said, what would you really like to have help with? Well, honestly, I don't know. Can I talk private here when the company's paying? I said, does what you do privately affect you in the business? And he goes, of course. Yeah, you're a human being 24 hours a day. So whatever you do privately will affect you when you're in business, and whatever you do in business will affect you privately. So I don't see a difference, so you're fine. You should be able to talk about private because it will be good for you in the business. And he goes, well, my girlfriend is driving me crazy. That's really what I would like to have help with. I said, why is she driving you crazy? I don't know. She's just oscillates between being so wonderful and being a total bitch. So I really don't know if I should break up or marry her. Now, those two are a bit further away, aren't they? Those are not that close. But he has the same dilemma, which is, I don't know what to do. They're so far apart, I can't know which one it is. So guess what we do? We talk about the principles behind psychology until they all of a sudden do, and he goes, oh, I know now. Right? Because you come pre-installed with everything you need as soon as you find that. So since you're coming off lunch, it could be a good time to just stand up a little bit. Just do that for me. And here's what I would like you to do. Here's what I would like you to do. Just find a place where you have what you think is good balance. Whatever you determine to be, this is good balance. And with good balance, I mean somebody could sneak up on you and give you a nudge backwards, forwards, or sideways, or in between, or whatever, right? And you would still just be like, okay, that's a good balance. Not if like an American quarterback just comes and that's not the balance I'm talking about, because nobody can hold their balance then. But the kind of balance where somebody could at least nudge you from any direction. So it's not like leaning into it, like knowing it's coming. It's more like, well, push me whichever way you want. Now, I'll probably just do this. Can you recognize that place? Just find it. Just center yourself. Now, here's the important question with all this. How do you know you're in balance now? How do you know you're in balance? You feel it, but here's the weird part of it. Just try this on for size, because I'm the guy who says there is no box, right? So try this on for size. After having met so many people around the world, I would say that the place that you call balance is the place you feel it the least. Do you know what I'm saying? So try this. Just lean a little bit backwards and notice your thighs going. And then lean a little bit forwards and notice your calves and toes go. Can you feel the pressure? Okay, that pressure is a signal to the brain that says you're off balance, get back. You don't have to think about it. See? You always go back. So even if I were to push you really hard so you went like this, oh, what are you doing? You'll come back and say, what are you doing? And you're in balance. You don't have to think about it, and you don't think about it because great balance is where you don't feel it. Can you feel that? Okay. It's the same in your mind. A balanced mind is the place where you don't feel it. But what does most people do when they try to find it? They go like, oh, not there. Oh, not there either. That doesn't feel good at all. And that feels like really crappy. And that is really bad. I wonder why I'm not finding it. It's really hard finding it. What do I do? How do I find it? Well, stop thinking and you'll do this. It's automatic. It's as automatic as blinking your eye when it's dry. As soon as it dries out a little bit, you go blink. If you have to think about it, it gets to be a nuisance. I promise you. 2 minutes of blinking consciously, you'd be going like, oh, stop it, please. Right? So balance is really easy to find. It is where it isn't, so to speak. That's because we didn't know that. We're trying to feel where it is. But then you're in other places. Does that make sense to anybody? Right? So we've been looking in the wrong place. So you're looking for what doesn't feel. Anybody in here right now feel healthy? Healthy in the way that, I mean, you could go and run up those stairs, and when you stop on top of the stairs, it wouldn't go like boof, 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 boof. It would be healthy in the way where it's like, yeah, my body feels okay, right? Anybody say that I'm healthy? Cool. How does it feel to be healthy? Yeah? Okay, I'll show you. I wish you could have been up here right now. And the reason is because I see all these hundreds of faces, and here's how you react. I say, anybody healthy in here right now? And then I say, how does it feel to be healthy? Yeah, great. Ooh, fantastic. Never thought about it. It's good. Why? Because being healthy is the place where you feel it the least. So you don't think about it until you get a disease. Then you start saying healthy is pretty good, right? But it's where you don't feel it you're healthy, right? And that's why athletes tell me all the time about that. When they're in the zone and they're performing, they say that's like, I just did it. And then they get up on the podium and they're like this, yay, right? Now, if you would go to Wikipedia and look up happiness, there would be a picture of an athlete going, yay! That's happy, right? That's what we've been sold as an idea. This is happy. Yeah! This is happy! And if you're not there, you need Prozac. Right? But when I ask the athletes, when you're running and you're doing this, and then you're standing like this, which one feels better? Here's what they say. I would trade hours on the podium for a second of that feeling that doesn't feel like anything. See what I'm saying? So we're constructing it too much instead of realizing just sitting there sharing silence with somebody can be the best thing ever when you have more of a quiet mind, when you don't take your thinking seriously. It doesn't feel anything, but if you're asked afterwards, how was that when you were sitting with her on the and watching the sunset? It's like, wow, it doesn't get any better than that, only different. Right? And then you can have caveman sex and your head goes, and you want to bite your arm off to get away from there. And then you blame it on them for not being good in bed. See what's going on? You can sit down again. So I'm saying this is very natural. You can never wake up out of balance, really. I mean, nobody wakes up tomorrow morning and goes, oh, I woke up out of balance and now I'm screwed. Right? You will go back. That's the mistake we make when we, in relationships or at work, when somebody's off, will they say and do things they will regret later? Is that true? Yeah? So if I were able to put a brain scanner on you that was no bigger than a little cap, and we had that connected to a camera, and on the screen, all we see is, are you doing this or are you like this? And every time you're like this, the camera goes on. And then we cut that together to one movie and show it to other people. What would be their opinion of you? They would go, oh, she's a psycho bitch. He's just impossible. That's like the devil, right? Because we all have that. It doesn't matter. 7.2 billion people on the planet. You do this, you say and do things you regret. And if we cut that together, so that's your brand, right? As Andrea would say, that's your brand. That would look horrible. Now, let's say we switch on the computer and say, anytime we see that you go, and then the camera goes on, and then we show the movie, guess what everybody would say? She can't be that perfect. She's just handling everything with grace. Even when people are hard on her, she just goes, oh, and they solve things and stuff. Can you relate to this? Right? Do we all have that? Is that why we, through history, have always related to all plays and movies and books? And in those, there's always a duality of darkness and black and white and light and devil, angel. Anybody relate to this? Okay? And we take that seriously, but honestly, in all honesty, there exists no darkness. Darkness has no power, so there is no fight. Darkness is only light, the absence of light. So if the light from our little sun comes zooming out into space, wherever it goes, there is darkness, right? But darkness isn't fighting light, because darkness is only the absence of light. So anywhere light goes, it becomes light without any opposition from darkness. You see this? So it's the same in your mind. We have a thought construct that there should be evil and good and this and that. But anytime there's darkness in your head, it's just the absence of light. As soon as you see what's going on and you do this, poof, there is no struggle from darkness anymore. That's why it goes boom, oh, now I see what to do. Right? It can look totally impossible and the devil is here, or darkness will be forever and I will never get out of this. And all of a sudden you do this, poof, and he's like, why did I make such a big fuss out of that little thing? You see it? Once you start understanding what's actually going on, it's very, very liberating. Anybody see how this is actually very practical in business? If you can just talk to people about it and say things like, you know, I don't know if you want to hear this, but right now your thinking is making it worse than it is. And if you say that from a place of compassion where you see, because I've done that, I've been there, I know exactly, the human experience is the same for you and I. It doesn't matter who you are. If you come from that place when you say it, it will be very helpful for them. But if you come from a place of you already in your head is up here, so you're a bit irritated, but I'm not going to show my damn wife, right? If you're, or partner, or whatever, if you're not because I'm going to be the high road, so I'm not even going to show them I'm irritated. Then it's going to be like, it's only your thinking. Anybody realize that's not going to help? So it's not the words. All the information is in the feeling you bring to it. When you have a better feeling, everything changes. So how many in here are parents again? Quite a few parents. Now, all the rest of you have to imagine this if you haven't seen it. How many of you parents have ever sat next to your child and watched them sleep? Isn't that a beautiful experience? It's like, in Spanish, they say that a sleeping baby is like an angel, right? Can you relate to that if you've watched them there, right? If only they wouldn't open their eyes and screw the whole thing up. Right? But when you're sitting there watching them sleep, it's like, oh, right? I'm going to tell you something now. If you can find a way to parent from that feeling, you don't need to read a parenting book ever. You're going to be the best parent anybody's ever seen. If you try to parent without that feeling, it doesn't matter how many books you read. See, the information is in the feeling. And it's so easy to make the mistake, right? I can totally relate. Having had 3 small kids in a fairly short amount of time, I got sent out of the house by my wife. She just said, take the boys, get out of here. And I said, what should I do? Right? And she said, go shopping, we need food. Right? It's just get out of here. I need my own time. Anybody can relate to this? Okay. So I take the boys and I go to the local supermarket and I walk around with them and we pick the stuff that we got a little list that she sent on the SMS, right? So because otherwise she knows I wouldn't get everything home. because how could my engineering brain handle 11 things? So I walk around with a list just to be sure. And as we're walking around, you notice other people not being in the greatest state of mind. It's like people come in there and they have a purpose when they walk in. Have you seen that? But it's like the design of a supermarket is like to suck all life out of it. So people walk in there going like, I know what I want, I know what I want, I know what I want. And then you see them in there and it's like this. Right? So it's just, for me who actually is studying human behavior, that's like having lab rats. So I watch how people make decisions when they squeeze oranges and go, nah, and they take another one and say, and put it in the thing. And they go take the next one and go, yeah, and they go, and put it in the thing. So I tried one time to just see if you can create a thought virus, just to see if this works. So I had this woman standing there, yeah, yeah. So the next one she took, before she said it, said, and she put it in the basket. Right? So I thought, that's weird. That could have been a coincidence. So she reaches out her hand again, and I go, and she puts it in the bag. So I do this 11 times in a row. So all of a sudden, she has a bag full of oranges. And she's looking at the bag of oranges, and then she looks up at me, and she has no idea what's going on, but she has a feeling it might have something to do with me, right? So she looks at me very perplexed and says, I don't need this many oranges. And I looked at her and I said, I didn't know. So you can find humor anywhere once you get fascinated by human behavior. So I walk a little bit further and we get up into the produce area where you just have the vegetables and all the other stuff. And there's another father there. I can feel him, right? I can feel him because he only has one child, which makes me superior, of course. But that child is running around amok. I mean, he's like 3.5, 4 years old, because you can tell this thing when you have little children. Then you know about where they are just by how they move. So it's like, he's 3.5 to 4 years old, and he's running around everywhere, and he's screaming back at his dad, who's so tired. You can see he's not been sleeping much. He's like this. And he's like, Daddy, 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 can we have this? Can we have this? Can we have this? Can we have this? And after a while, the dad loses it. So he shouts at the kid who's on the other end of the produce, and he shouts at him like this, how many times have I told you not to shout? Now, if that's not funny to you, I don't know what should be. Right? So I'm feeling pretty good. I said, that's pretty stupid. He needs coaching, right? And you can get thinking and be pretty full of yourself. So I get everything and I go home. And when I go home, I hope that my wife is in a better mood, because we stayed away a long time, just to give her that time. And I walk in, and it turns out not so much. So she basically thinks that everything I do is wrong, and she just wants to point that out in a loving way. And I notice myself getting a little bit annoyed with her being irritated. Anybody had that? Right. And because I do what I do, when I got that feeling, I started realizing, you know what? It's equally funny right now. It's just that I'm not laughing, because I'm irritated with her irritation. It's just that I think that my irritation is just justified, whereas hers is just crazy. Right? Ever been there? And as soon as I saw that, I just went like, And you go back to it. I'm telling you this story to show that even if you understand this, it doesn't protect you from falling for your thinking. When somebody's out crawling in the desert and they crawl up to a mirage of an oasis, they don't crawl up to the mirage of the oasis because they see that it's a mirage. They crawl up because they think it's real. That's what we do inside our heads. We create a mirage, think it's real, and then we start crawling there. So you will always fall for it, but can you see there's a humility when you come back at least? So if you're really lucky, you can see it in the moment. Sometimes you can see it in the moment. Oh, that feeling wasn't good. Okay, I lost my perspective. So I realize I have idiotic thinking. It's not my wife being idiotic. That's a big, big difference. Right? Other times I don't catch it and there is an altercation. But then afterwards I go, oh, I fell for it, rather than that's just not right that she did that. Right? So if you understand what I'm saying here, here's one of the things of understanding that feeling is telling you about the quality of your thinking and not your circumstances. When you turn this way, your apologies become a lot better. Because most people don't apologize at all. They ruin it with an excuse. Do you know what I'm talking about? So your partner or somebody at work, doesn't matter who it is, this is a human thing, you can use it anywhere, right? They are doing something that you don't like. So you get irritated. And then afterwards, you don't like what's going on in the house, you almost start worrying about, will we break up? And this wasn't so good, maybe I need to be the big person to apologize here. I know I shouldn't because it's really them that should do it. But I'll be big enough to do it. Right? So you go there and you tell them your apology. And usually it's like, I'm really sorry that I screamed at you, honey. And then, but when you do that, it really, really hurts me. That's not respectful. That's not an apology. That's an invitation to war. So there's a big difference once you start seeing that. For example, now, if this happens and I find this balance again, when I go back here, I go to my wife and I apologize from the heart. And when you use truth to apologize, nobody opposes it. So that sounds something like this. Like, honey, I'm really sorry I shouted at you. I got totally lost in my head. And then I blame the feelings I had from that on you. And I'm really sorry, I love you. Can you see how that wouldn't be like, you bastard, we have to talk more. Right? So, but then you can't be sitting where you're sitting now and say, oh, that's good, I'll write that down. Next time I'll... See, it's not what I said, it's the space where it's coming from. You see, it might be totally different from you. What would you come up with? Because you have to realize something. All of you sitting here right now, there's nobody in the world wiser than you. Nobody's wiser than you. Are there people more intelligent than you? Yes. Are there people less intelligent than you? Yes. But nobody's wiser than you. And wisdom beats intelligence 8 days a week. Right? That's why you were undecided on that one. It's like, yeah, I think, oh, nobody else is doing? No. So, when we touch our own wisdom, and we can touch that space of wisdom, all of us. That's why small kids have wisdom. That's why that they can come up with things where you're thinking, how can you come up with that? You haven't done much in your life. You basically peed yourself, and kept us awake at night. That's your CV, right? How can you come up with this? But they can, and it's always available. That wisdom is always available. And if you don't touch wisdom, intelligence will take you where you don't want to be faster. It's a little bit like I was in Minnesota. I don't know if you know this about Minnesota, but that's the biggest colony of Swedish people outside of Sweden. So Swedish people said, oh, Sweden, it's lousy. There's no food, it's cold, it's really tough life. Let's go to Minnesota. Have you heard about Florida? No, I kind of felt comfortable, so I go to the same kind of shed again. So anyway, there's a lot of Swedes up there, and they tell the Americans around the community tell stories like we do in Scandinavia. Most of you know, for example, that Swedish people tell Norwegian stories and Norwegian people tell Swedish stories. And what they have in common is that the other ones are really stupid and we're really smart. So they do the same, but they do it about Swedish people in Minnesota. And I had no idea until I got there and I told I was from Sweden. Then they started telling me the Swedish jokes. And apparently, the Swedish jokes in Minnesota is always Olaf and Sven. So that's their idea of Swedish people. They're named Olaf and Sven. So he tells me this story about Olaf and Sven. They go hunting. So they go out hunting, and they find this big moose, big antlers, everything. And they go like, wow, that would be a prize to carry home. And they're like, pow! And they shoot it, and they run up. And what they do is they take the hind legs, one each, and they start dragging them back to the car. And it's a tough job. Now, another American hunter, of course, then, comes up and says, hey, Olaf and Sven, nice moose you got there. What are you doing? Well, we're dragging it back to the car. Yeah, but didn't you know that the good Lord gave the moose antlers because it's much easier to pull them by the antlers? So Olaf and Sven says, that's a fantastic idea, let's try it. So they walk around to the other side of the moose and grab the antlers and start pulling it. And Olaf says to Sven, that guy was really right. We're probably going double as fast doing this. And then Sven says, yeah, but we get him further and further from the car. And that's how we live our lives a lot. That's why we get more and more stressed. That's why we have that much divorce. But as soon as you start looking to your own wisdom, once you start looking to your own wisdom, and you all have it, it's right there. You know which way to drag it. It's amazing how that happens. So I'll conclude this short hour that I have with you with a story about my son. Because my middle son, who's 2.5 years old, had a very eventful fall. First, I went to the library with him, and they have a special cozy corner for smaller kids where they can jump around and do stuff. And he decides to jump from something, and he goes in, and he misses it, and boom, face plant. I don't know, if you're parents, you know how to grade pain by how long it takes before they start crying. Right? So if they immediately go, wah, you know, that's not too bad, get up, right? But if you hear, if there's like, bam, and then they start crying, you know it's for real, right? So it takes a while, and as soon as it starts taking a while, it's like whatever wisdom you have, you're just up there without thinking about it. So I turn him around, and it turns out they have a little bit of an aluminum piece right sitting there, and it's just going, pow, right at his head. So his whole forehead just opens up. It just opens up. It's all bone. I mean, it's almost like when you do a plastic surgery and you cut somebody's face off. He's 2.5 years old, right? And I have my 6-year-old with me at the time too. And when the shock stops, it just starts gushing blood. So I'm just taking my shirt and just going right there in the library, and I push it together and take my shirt and just apply pressure. And everybody's like, whoa. And I said, Vince, you have to be big now. You have to run after me because I'm going to run as fast as I can to the car, and we're going to take Colin, as his name is, up to the emergencies straight away. And he's really good. He's running after me. And this little guy, he's sitting there like this, and he's crying, of course. And then I say, I actually have to put you in your car seat now. And I have to drive the car, so I can't hold it. But you have to have pressure here. Can you hold it yourself? So 2.5 years old says, okay, Dad. So we drive to the emergency ward, and I come out. Now you can imagine, I'm driving like I had my signals mixed. Let's just put it that way. Let's just put it that way. I was not the slowest car on that road. And when I get out of the car, I am not the slowest human on that planet either. So I run around and I open it, and this is where wisdom comes in. My 2.5-year-old recognizes exactly what I do as a coach. he probably sees that Dad is a little bit up in his head. So he sits there with his hand like this. I open the door and I'm going to unsnap him. And he looks at me and puts the other hand on my arm and says, "I'm okay, Dad." Right? Makes you cry almost. So we carry him in there, and it takes a long time like it always does. But finally they have to sedate him and sew him up in like 3 different layers. So it's like you have to do the first layer and do that, second layer do that, and then the skin. So it's a big operation, and they can't do it without sedating him because a 2.5-year-old just moves around too much. So you're a bit worried about the sedation, you're a bit worried about all these things, right? And then afterwards, since he's a little kid and he's hit his head, they have to put him on observation for 24 hours to see that he hasn't got a concussion and there's nothing bad to the brain. And when you do that, I have to stay because my wife at the time is pregnant like this. It's like we didn't know it at the time. We had 3 weeks left then until we're going to have the baby girl. So she can't be with him during the night. So I stay, and they have to come in every hour to check on him, which means they open his eyelids, light it in, and see that's okay. And then they check blood values. So he's like, "Whoa," every hour. And I have to be there going, calm down, calm down, calm down. And then at 4 o'clock, you realize why they use sleep deprivation as torture. So basically when the nurse comes in, and this is the same nurse that I thought before took too long to finally get to my kid. This time I'm thinking, can you strangle a nurse? Get away with it and just put her in a closet so I can sleep. Right? The thought kind of strikes my mind. See, but here's the good thing about when you understand your thinking. You are not responsible for your thinking. Your thinking just happens to you. You don't know what you're going to think in 5 seconds. You can't steer it. It just pops in your head like a popcorn bowl. It's just a boppity, 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 boppity. Like that one, boppity, boppity. Here's a new one, boppity, boppity, boppity. Right? So you're not responsible for your thinking, but you are, however, in our society, responsible for your acting on those thoughts. There's your responsibility. So if you're honest, has anybody in here ever actually thought thoughts like I had, I want to kill that bastard, honestly? Most people have done that at some point in time. So how come you're not in jail? Because at that time you said, that's just a weird thought, and you didn't do it. Are there people when they have that thought that immediately just go, boom? Yes, they're in prison. They have no impulse control because they don't understand their thinking, right? That's what I want to get to. It's not like you understand this and you never have a psycho thought. You will have plenty of them, but you will also always have, since this is unlimited, you get all these wonderful thoughts that could change the world. And how do you know it's a good thought? When you have it, it doesn't feel much. That's what intuition is. Anytime I have somebody come up to me and say, I have really strong intuition, I know they're really in their head. There are no strong intuitions. Intuition is more like, oh, I think I'll do that. Let's do that. Right? It's a softer, more humble intention. Then you know you're following what you're supposed to be following. Right? That intuition is never strong. Strong, that means you have strong thoughts. Then you get strong feelings to warn you. So intuition is always, oh, that's what I should do. Recognize that when you have good decisions, right? Just checking that it's gravity and not just theory. So the more you can see that going on, you don't have to act on your bad thinking. You just act on the thinking that is like, oh, I should probably do that because I didn't get a warning sign. Right? That's how this is a perfect GPS through life. It's a perfect GPS through life once you understand what it's actually saying. It's not when it has strong feelings of up and down and stuff like that. That's not when you should, that's just a warning. Because can you be so positive that it's bad for you? Have you heard about groupthink? Groupthink is when a lot of people get together and they all believe the same thing, so they talk each other and they get like, yeah, this feels so good, it must be right. And then they do bad things for society. right? So strong feelings, no matter if they're positive or negative, are in the way. There's a deeper feeling behind it. The deep feelings when it's just the one that every athlete would trade hours of for. That's where the wisdom is, right? So now anyway, everything is fine. My kid is okay. 2 weeks later, he gets bitten by a viper at daycare. What are the odds in Sweden? Right? And they don't understand what it is because he's such a little trooper. He's standing somewhere and there's a viper, bites him twice back here. Just go pow, pow. And they have different kind of bites. They have huggorm, a viper, snake. So it bites him twice. And they have 3 types of bites. They have a dry bite that just says, get away. And then they have a half-full venom that says, get the fuck out of here. And then they have the full venom which says, I'm going to eat you. So he gets number 2 twice. He's 2.5 years old. And they don't understand what it is because he's crying. And then he starts playing. So he gets to play for 3 hours. The last thing you should do is run around after that. So when my wife comes there, his leg is like that. So she says, I think he might have hit a nail or something and now it's infected. I said, infection doesn't go that fast. Can you do that and send me a picture? Sends the picture and I look at it and said, that's a snake bite. And she said, I'm worried enough. Don't try to make fun of this. Right? So I said, no, honestly, honey, I've been on a golf course all over the world. I know what a snake bite looks like. He's bitten by a snake. I'll meet you at the hospital now. So we go there, and yes, it's a snake bite, and he has to have like treatment and serum and whatever. And then he has to stay again for observation. And guess who has to be there? I care about my kid, but I can tell you that this time they do a lot more testing because if the venom is going to the wrong places, his kidneys and liver might fail. So they have to like prick him on the finger every 45 minutes and check his eyes and all of that. Which means that he's like, wah! And then when I calm him down, then I have to calm me down. And then I try to fall asleep. And then I finally fall asleep and they come in again. And this just repeats. And at 4 o'clock, I have a reoccurring thought. I wonder if I could kill this person. And I'm totally into it. This time I'm into it. I'm into it. I'm really into it. So, but I have this moment of clarity. Right in the middle of all that, I have this moment in clarity. She opens the door. The light from the corridor out in the hospital comes in. And it shines a little light on us. And I look up and I tell her, just so you know, I already checked him and he's fine. So you can just get out of here and let me sleep. But I want you to know I'm only saying that because I'm tired out of my mind and I'm thinking about killing you. Right? So the nurse says, I can feel where you're coming from. I haven't slept much in 4 nights either. Right? And then in that moment of both of us touching the humanity in here, we had the most beautiful meeting. Even though I could have sworn, I'm so tired I can't function. We have this meeting of the minds where I say, I can imagine walking around here. How many kids are here right now? We have about 34. Will all of those kids survive, you think? No. So she sees little kids die, and I'm worried that I don't get to sleep. See, before that it was like this, I can't sleep because the ears are closed, I can't decide. And then all of a sudden I go, in the middle of the night, I've slept as little. I'm as worried about my kid as always, but all of a sudden I touch that space and we have this humorous moment where I see where she's coming from and she sees where I'm coming from. And when I wake up at 7 o'clock that morning and I decide that, okay, I'm not going to get any sleep, so I might as well go out and get some breakfast, she is going off her shift. And I promise you, the look we give each other and the smile we give each other is so full of that humanity that it's almost like we fought a war together and will never, ever leave each other's sides. Do you know what I'm talking about? That you can meet somebody and have that connection and it's like more than somebody you know in 10 years, right? That's what happens when you meet from that inner space of wisdom, that humanity, that life force, whatever you want to call it, as long as you know you're just calling it something and you can never know. But when you meet there and know that that is available 24 hours a day, every second of the hour, that is available to come, and something will happen that's more beautiful than you can plan, right? And you can take that to the bank. And I can tell from the feeling in the room that a lot of you are in that space. And once you start recognizing that space, there is no belief you can make up that is as good as those deeper feelings from coming from that space. And my hope of being here and sharing what I shared is that you find that space a bit more often. And you become deeply compassionate, loving, and all those deep things that we try to think we can construct. And it turns out they come pre-equipped in that space. So that every time you hit that space, boom, there they are. And anytime you're not in that space, you can't go to compassionate and loving, even if I put it and brand it on your forehead. Because you're going to be, I want to kill that person and put them in a cupboard. Right? And if you can see that, then I feel that it was worth it to be away from family, which we all know is most important, right? So I can go home and say, hey, I know I was away, and I know it was Father's Day, and I can give them a hug and say, you should see the faces of the people. Some of them got some insights that will really help them. It was worth it that Daddy was away, and I hope that you think it was worth it too. So thank you.